Steam rose from the cup, but the real heat came from the clue inside. Welcome to Faded Echoes. I am your host, Ombra. Drop a comment, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from today. Reading your thoughts truly makes my day. If you've ever lived in New York and tried to keep your coffee preferences a secret, forget it. This city reads its beans like gypsies read poems. You get a double espresso on Madison, and you're a ruthless executive, drip with cream and two. Sugars on 38th means you work in accounts receivable and live with your mother. And if you drink Turkish coffee in a midtown diner at 2 a.m., well, you're either up to something or just finished being up to something. I mention this only because the morning it all started, I had just finished brewing my own cup, blessedly strong and black, and had made the mistake of pouring a second one for the man in the office, who claims to loathe everything about caffeine except its botanical origins. You used the Sumatra Mandheling, Nero Wolfe said, without looking up from the book in his lap. It has too much earthy musk. The Ethiopian Hara would have complimented this weather better. I sipped mine anyway. You're welcome, I said. He grunted. It was 10:43 a.m., and the brownstone was at peace. Fritz was in the kitchen, conjuring up something with leeks and Madeira. Theodore was up in the plant rooms, whispering to an orchid that had been in a mood since Tuesday. I was going over our bank account, which, despite my efforts at charm and Wolfe's efforts at stasis, was beginning to resemble the Sahara. That's when the doorbell rang. Wolfe glanced at the clock. Whoever it is, they are inconsiderate. They're early, I said, standing. Mrs. Stebbins is coming at 11. Maybe she decided to beat the rush. I find that unlikely. So did I, Mrs. Stebbins? The widow of a former Westchester pastry magnate was due to arrive for a consultation about her late husband's will, and if her previous visit was anything to go by, she'd come swathed in perfume and clutching a manila envelope like it contained the secret to immortality. But the person standing on our stoop wasn't her. He was tall, mid-30s, and didn't look like he knew what to do with his hands, so he kept changing which pocket they lived in. His eyes flicked up and down the street before landing back on me. Mr. Goodwin, he asked. You got him, I said. And you are Samuel Rudd. I need to speak with Mr. Wolfe. It's urgent. He doesn't know me, but it concerns someone who does. I hesitated. You get enough guys showing up unannounced with vague connections and urgent tones, and you start keeping a tally. Wolfe didn't like his mornings disturbed unless someone had already paid, threatened, or intrigued him. Still, something about the guy's voice had a tremor in it, not nervous-like. A thief, more like someone who's seen something they wish they hadn't. I opened the door wider. Come in. He stepped into the hallway and blinked like the light was too much. I guided him into the office, where Wolfe, from his chair, looked at him like an offensive garnish. This is Samuel Rudd, I said. He says it's urgent. That remains to be seen, Wolfe said. Mr. Rudd? The guy sat on the edge of the red leather chair like it might bite. I work at an importing company, Damber and Galt. We specialize in premium coffees and spices. I handle client accounts, or I did. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. Continue. 2 days ago, my supervisor, Regina Caro, was found dead in her apartment. The police are calling it an accident, gas leak, but it wasn't. He paused and his voice dropped. It was staged. That's usually where the music swells and the dramatic lighting kicks in. But here at the brownstone, all you get is Wolfe folding his hands over his stomach. Why come to me? Because I know who did it, I think. And if I'm right, they're not going to stop with her. That got Wolfe's attention, or at least his eyelids opened slightly wider. You believe you are in danger? Rudd nodded. Yes, but it's not just me. There's something. There was a ledger Regina kept. Not digital, old school, leather-bound. It wasn't in her apartment when they found her. And I think it's because someone from the company took it before the police arrived. And what? Mr. Rudd was in this ledger client shipments, codes. Some of them didn't match the real manifests. Regina was keeping track of something else, something off books. Wolfe's nostrils flared slightly. I knew that look. It meant he'd caught a whiff of corruption, and while he wasn't one for chasing shadows, he had a refined palate for rot. I need someone to help me find it, Rudd said. Before whoever took it finds me. There was a pause. Wolfe didn't move. You have no evidence, only an assertion, a suspicion, and a dead woman whose demise has been ruled accidental. I know, but I can prove it if I can get back into the office. I need someone who can protect me, or at least help me make sense of it. Wolfe turned to me. Archie? Yes, sir? Did you prepare the Ethiopian this morning? No, sir. You were outvoted. HMPH. Brew a pot now, and show Mr. Rudd to the front room. I need 10 minutes. Rudd looked confused. So, you'll take the case? Wolfe waved a dismissive hand. I will take 10 minutes. I escorted our visitor out and brewed the hurrah. Wolfe stayed in the office, doing what he always did in such interludes, nothing that looked like thinking, but most certainly was. When I returned with the tray and the coffee, he was ready. Bring him back, he said, and prepare yourself for what? For a dismal parade of greed dressed in cinnamon and cardamom. We are about to enter a world where even the grounds are suspect. I went to get Rudd, wondering how deep this particular rabbit hole went and what kind of coffee they were serving down. There, Rudd returned to the red chair, clutching the coffee cup like it might save his life. He took a cautious sip and blinked. This is incredible. Wolfe inclined his head, a slight concession. It is also expensive. Now, Mr. Rudd, you said you could prove your claim if given access to your office. Precisely what would you be looking for? A backup copy. Regina was paranoid. She told me once she didn't trust the cloud. I think she made a physical duplicate of the ledger, and she hinted that it wasn't far from her desk. If I can find it, I can show you what she was tracking. Wolfe tapped a finger against his chair arm. And you suspect that someone in your firm is responsible for Miss Caro's death? Yes. Name them. Rudd hesitated, then drew a breath. There are for people who had reason to be nervous about Regina. One is the managing partner, Darius Galt. He's old school, all about appearances. But Regina told me he'd been siphoning off stock small quantities. Over time charging high-end clients double for custom imports and pocketing the difference. Wolfe grunted, "Second is Anya Bell. She's in charge of internal logistics. Smart, ruthless. And Regina's direct rival. They clashed more than once about pricing, staff, even how samples were catalogued. Third, Jeff Garrison. New. Hire, sales associate. Too smooth, too fast." Regina thought he was planted, maybe even by a competitor. She caught him asking about high-volume orders that didn't match the supply chain. And the fourth, Rudd glanced down at his coffee, swirled it. "Me?" I sat up straighter. Wolfe didn't flinch, but I could see his left brow hover for a second. Regina thought I was too close to the numbers, too aware of how the shipping patterns worked. She told me once, only half joking, that if anything ever happened to her, someone might try to pin it on me. Did she say why? She said I was too neat, too clean not to be suspicious. Rudd offered a weak smile. "That's why I came to you. I'm not the killer, but if Regina was right, someone else thinks I might be the perfect fall guy." Wolfe exhaled heavily. "Archie." "Yes, sir. You will accompany Mr. Rudd to this office. I want a detailed look at the physical layout, especially Regina Caro's desk. Make no overt inquiries. Collect impressions." I nodded. "Got it. I shall also require Mr. Panzer." I picked up the phone and dialed Saul's number, relaying the essential details. He agreed to tail Rudd from a distance to make sure we weren't being too trusting of our neat and nervous visitor. 10 minutes later, Rudd and I were in a cab heading down to the Damber and Galt offices in the garment district. He fidgeted the entire ride, pulling at his cuff, glancing behind us as if guilt or worse were about to tap him on the shoulder. The office sat on the 6th floor of an aging commercial block, with one of those elevators that wheezes like it's dying with every floor it gains. Inside, it was all chrome, blonde wood, and silence too clean, too tidy. The kind of place where secrets weren't hidden in the dark, but filed under S and color-coded. Rudd nodded to the receptionist, who gave him a polite smile and a wary glance. "They haven't cleaned out Regina's things yet," he whispered. As we walked past, she wasn't exactly popular. No one's rushing to claim her stapler. The door to her office was closed. He opened it gently, and I stepped in. It was compact but immaculate. A single window, desk, credenza, and a pair of filing cabinets. No signs of disarray, no open folders or lingering signs of life. But what caught my eye were the coffee cups. 3 of them, neatly lined up on the shelf behind her desk, each labeled in black marker, Colombian A, Sundered Guji, decaf. Not what you'd expect from someone who died from a gas leak. Rudd was already crouched behind the desk, checking under the drawers. She used to say everything important had a smell. That was her way of remembering. I glanced around. "You said she might have stashed a copy of the ledger. Where?" She once joked that she kept her secrets between the grounds. I thought she meant gossip. I looked at the coffee cups again. Maybe she didn't. I took them down carefully. The Colombian A had a thin layer of coffee grounds at the bottom normal. So did the decaf, but the Sundered Guji had something else. The grounds were piled higher, heavier. I poured them into a tissue. Inside was a thin slip of paper, folded once. It wasn't the full ledger, but it was a key, literally it. Had a handwritten list of client initials, delivery dates, and something else, locker numbers. Storage facility, I said. Rudd took it from me, mouth slightly open. She had a second cache. I didn't even think. He was interrupted by the office door opening. A woman in her early 40s stepped in, tall, angular, hair pulled back like a whip. She looked at us like we were mildew. "Samuel, you're not supposed to be in here." Rudd straightened. "Anya." She looked me up and down. "And you are?" I smiled. "Archie Goodwin, coffee enthusiast." Her eyes narrowed. "We're still grieving. Regina's death has left a real gap in our operations. I'm sure you understand how inappropriate this is." "We're not here long," I said. "Just trying to make sense of things." Ms. Caro left behind a few unanswered questions. She crossed her arms. "That woman left behind a mess. If you're digging through it, I suggest gloves." She left without another word. I turned to Rudd. "Friendly bunch." He exhaled. "She's always like that." I pocketed the slip of paper and nodded toward the hallway. "Let's go. You've already used up your daily quota of suspicious behavior." We left the building and walked half a block before Salt peeled off from a lamppost shadow and fell in beside me. "Well?" I asked. "Someone was watching the building," Saul murmured. "Black coat, blue scarf. Didn't follow you, but I made a note." "Great. Someone else who likes coffee." Rudd looked pale again, but he kept walking. Back at the brownstone, I handed Wolfe the paper and the news. He turned it over once, then twice, and leaned back with a grunt. "There is a vault," he said. "Let us now see who guards it and who is willing to kill for its contents." I had a feeling we were only just getting the first whiff of something brewing, and it wasn't coffee. By the time I got back from delivering the slip of paper and the sour whiff of Anya Bell to Wolfe's desk, Fritz had already started roasting veal for lunch. The scent hit me the moment I stepped into the hallway, a culinary uppercut that reminded me how long it had been since breakfast. But I didn't get to linger. Wolfe waved me in the moment I knocked. The paper was on his blotter, flattened under a glass paperweight shaped like a chess palm, and his eyes were on me like I'd brought back a wine list with the wrong vintage. "This," he said, tapping the paper, "was not intended for its finder. It was intended for its reader. Regina Caro hid it not to prevent discovery, but to ensure it would be discovered by someone who could decipher it. Rudd, by guest, or someone else, someone she trusted or someone she feared." I pulled the red chair closer. "Then why hide it in a coffee cup to make it memorable?" He pressed his fingertips together. "If she was aware she might die, she wanted to create a breadcrumb, something subtle, not a beacon. A breadcrumb for someone with the context. And we followed it." "What now?" Wolfe pointed at the names. "These are not names. They are initials, and some are repeated. JG, for instance, is listed 3 times. That is significant. Jeff Garrison, possibly. We are not yet certain." But consider Miss Caro documented dates and locker numbers. Storage. That implies she believed there was physical evidence, not merely records. The locker is the next necessary step. I was about to reply when the phone rang. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's residence. A voice, female, mid-Atlantic and mid-furious, snapped through the line. Put Mr. Wolfe on. Tell him it's Mrs. Dorothea Stebbins, and I will not be dismissed. I covered the receiver. Mrs. Stebbins, furious. Wolfe sighed, as expected. Put her through. I transferred the call. Wolfe spoke for words, crisp as radishes in frost. Mrs. Stebbins, you are early. I only heard one side, but I didn't need subtitles. She accused. He deflected. She insisted. He declined. And when she finally hung up, Wolfe glanced at me and said, she will be here in 1 hour, and she will bring with her a copy of her husband's will to pastries, and a threat to go to the press. Schedule accordingly. I nodded. And the locker. You and Mr. Panzer will inspect it. Now, it took us 40 minutes to get across town. Rudd had called in the locker location earlier. It was in a self-storage facility on 11th Avenue. One of those grey buildings with faded blue stripes and buzzers that never buzz. Saul was already leaning on the building's brick facade when I arrived. You have the slip? He asked. I nodded and handed it over. The locker was number for 09B, and the initials RC were marked at the bottom. Not for Regina Caro, but maybe for return copy. The girl at the front desk barely looked up from her crossword. She took our IDs, punched a code, and pointed down. A long hallway that smelled like cardboard and bleach. Locker for 09B had a steel door, a basic combo padlock, and no warning labels. I cracked the combination year of Regina's hire, I guessed. Based on her file at Damba, and Goltan the lock clicked open. Inside were 5 things: a medium-sized wooden box, a manila envelope sealed with brown tape, a half-used bag of Kenyan, a coffee, a thumb drive in a red case, and a piece of paper taped to the back wall, with one sentence on it. If you're reading this, you'd better already know whom not to trust. I whistled low. She had flair. Saul opened the wooden box. Inside were 5 mini-ledgers, thin notebooks with handwritten entries, organized by initials and dates. A pattern emerged fast. Orders that never matched invoices, weight discrepancies, and coded notes about packaging swaps. She tracked everything, I murmured, even when they started hiding things inside coffee shipments. Saul held up the thumb drive. You want me to pull the data? Yeah, carefully. I'll get this back to Wolfe. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe didn't even wait for me to speak. He took one look at the envelope, opened it, and examined its contents. The top document was a scan of a shipping order from 3 weeks ago. That had apparently sent 30 pounds of Sumatran beans to a client who'd only ordered 5. Hidden in the beans, a different product entirely. He read the list once, twice, then spoke. This is contraband, not drugs. Something rarer. Like what? Rare spices, banned imports, endangered botanicals, possibly even insect derivatives, for illicit perfumes, all with high value, all traceable only through meticulous forensic work. Miss Caro had discovered her firm was a conduit for exotic laundering. He sat back. He's on the airline end. If Garrison boarded that plane, he'll find it. But my bet? He chickened out. Someone spooked him. Wolfe inserted the flash drive into the office laptop. He only used it under duress. But Fritz had long since taught him which buttons not to press. He scanned the folders. Encrypted, he muttered. You want me to call Lon Cohen's guy? No. I want you to call Lily Rowan. I blinked. Lily? She has a cousin in Palo Alto. Works for a firm whose only product is access. Ask nicely. He owes her. I made the call. Lily answered on the second ring and, with a warmth I didn't deserve, told me she'd have her cousin look at it that afternoon. You should visit more, she added. Preferably not on official business. I'll wear a tie. Don't. It makes you lie faster. When I relayed all this to Wolfe, he nodded in grudging approval. Tonight, he said, we gather them. All three. Yes, Bell, Galt, and Mr. Rudd. I raised an eyebrow. You think Rudd's involved now? I think, Wolfe said slowly, that Regina Caro was playing a long game, and one of her players got tired of being maneuvered. He leaned back. Have them here by 8, at 7:30. The brownstone had that rare energy it only gets when the stakes are high. Fritz polished silverware he wouldn't use. Theodore stayed upstairs, sensing the tension even among the orchids, and I stood at the door waiting for the circus to arrive. They came, one by one. First Anya Bell, crisp and aloof in grey wool. She said nothing when I took her coat, just gave me a look like I was the concierge at a second-rate hotel. Then Darius Galt, wearing the same overcoat as last time, but this time with a visible chip on his shoulder. This is ridiculous, he muttered. Last came Samuel Rudd, looking like he'd aged a week into days. He'd shaved, but badly, and his tie had been knotted in either fear or haste. Wolfe, from behind his desk, didn't rise. He simply lifted a finger. Sit. They did. I stood at my usual post, not far from the globe, arms crossed, eyes watching them like a hawk in a suit. Wolfe cleared his throat. This will be brief, unless any of you choose to prolong it by deception. He let that sit. No one spoke. I have reviewed Miss Caro's ledgers. I have inspected the contents of her private locker. I have assessed the false invoices and fabricated manifests. And, crucially, I have inferred motive. Miss Caro discovered a smuggling operation, one that used your firm's spice and coffee imports to conceal rare biological materials. The profits were considerable. So was the risk. Galt shifted. Miss Bell, Wolfe said, you benefited. From the shipments, your name appears beside the altered manifests more than any other. That's circumstantial, true, but compelling. To be clear, she said coolly, I did not kill Regina Caro. Wolfe turned. Mr. Galt, you oversaw the company. Either you were criminally negligent or criminally complicit. He swallowed. I didn't order anything. I knew it was happening, yes, but it was already in motion when I discovered it. Regina came to me. I told her to wait, that I'd fix it. She didn't believe me. Wolfe turned to Rudd. And you, Mr. Rudd, what did you do when she told you? Rudd looked at his hands. She showed me one ledger. Just one. I told her to go to the board. But you didn't go with her. I was scared, he whispered. They had power. Galt could ruin me. I thought if I just stayed out of it, you hoped she'd fix it, Wolfe said. But she didn't get the chance. He paused. Miss Caro was killed. Her death staged. And the only person she told everything to was Garrison. They all looked at Wolfe. He leaned forward. Garrison tried to flee. He left behind a flash drive encrypted. We will unlock it, and when we do, we will know which one of you gave the order or pulled the lever. He exhaled. If it was you, I suggest preparing a statement for the district attorney. It will lessen the blow. Bell stood first. You can't prove anything yet, correct? Wolfe said. But I will. She walked out. Galt followed. Seething, only Rudd remained seated. She was my friend, he said softly. Wolfe didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night, the orchids didn't bloom. But something else did. Inevitability. The following morning arrived with a grey sky and the kind of drizzling mist that made the city feel like it hadn't bathed properly. It had no energy, no pace, just a sluggish crawl through wet streets, dodging umbrellas and guilt. I'd barely taken the first sip of my second coffee when the call came in from Lily. Archie, she said, my cousin's a genius and a gossip. I'd figured the first part. Well, now you'll appreciate the second. He cracked the encryption on that flash drive. Said it was amateur stuff. Password was Caro Ledger. Subtle. Not at all. Anyway, I have the files. I'm sending you a zip link. You'll want to open it somewhere private. Always do. I said, and hung up. The drive contained 5 folders, each one labeled with a code. Cargo 01, Ledger C, Internal, Client Flags, and Witness. That last one caught my attention. I opened it. Inside were 3 video files. The first was dated 8 days before Regina Caro's death. The second was 5. The third was the night before. Each one showed the same scene, a small, nondescript office. Regina sitting at her desk, talking to Jeff Garrison. She'd set up her laptop webcam and recorded their meetings. In the first video, she confronted him. Calm, professional, razor sharp. She knew he was falsifying sales reports. Garrison looked jittery. Defensive. In the second, she laid out the ledgers. She had traced the discrepancies to 3 major clients and cross-referenced with warehouse records. He looked stunned. Then, in the third video, Regina was afraid. This isn't just inflated invoices, she said to him. They're moving illegal stock items that violate import law, endangered species statutes, and at least 2 international trade agreements. If you want out, Jeff, now's the time to talk. Because I'm going to the authorities. Tomorrow. Garrison didn't respond right away. Then he said, "You're making a mistake." That was it. No physical threats. No shouting, just a tone low, final, coiled. I didn't like it. I transferred the files to Wolfe's machine and knocked on the office door. He was already at his desk with the second draft of breakfast. Fritz had sent up poached eggs over toast with a tarragon hollandaise, which Wolfe was dissecting like it was the Treaty of Versailles. I played the third video first. Wolfe didn't interrupt. He sat perfectly still, eyes fixed on the screen, lips tight. When it ended, he said, "He killed her." I nodded. Yeah. But why wait to run? Maybe he thought he could control it. Maybe he was waiting to see if Regina really went public. Or maybe someone told him to keep quiet and then changed their mind. Wolfe looked at me. You believe he acted alone? I'm not sure. Garrison doesn't strike me as the mastermind type. He's the guy who gets handed the dirty job and gets told he'll be taken care of until he's not. Wolfe pressed a buzzer. Fritz, he said when the kitchen answered, black coffee, quickly. That was Wolfe's version of DEFCON 2. While we waited, I sifted through the rest of the drive. One file in the internal folder stood out. It was an unsigned memo written in business speak so bland it could have passed as oatmeal. But the subtext was clear. It referred to phase for diversions, priority clients, and removal of logistical obstacles. The metadata showed it had been last opened by someone logged in as able.dambre. I didn't say anything. I just turned the screen so Wolfe could read it. He tapped the keyboard, checking the access time. She knew, he said. She orchestrated some of it, enough to warrant Regina's death. She may not have ordered it, Wolfe said, but she permitted it. I leaned back. So we've got two names, Bell and Garrison. Gault? Gault is what the Romans call superfluous, bloated, and unnecessary. He knew, but lacked the nerve to act. That makes him culpable in a different way. Fritz arrived with the coffee. Wolfe sipped, grimaced, and pushed the cup slightly to the left, a sign that Fritz, despite perfection, had not adjusted to the day's gravity. I stood. You want them back here tonight? No, not yet. I want Garrison. He's still missing. Then find him. It was easier said than done. Garrison had apparently dropped off every radar in Manhattan, and his bank records, what I could get of them, showed a withdrawal of $1,100 3 days earlier, and nothing since. But one thing Garrison wasn't was clever. If he was running, he'd hide somewhere familiar. I thought of the Midtown parking garage, the car, the Miami stub. What else was nearby? Then I remembered the side apartment attached to the Damber, and Gault offices, the one reserved for out-of-town clients or visiting execs. I called the building supervisor. He was reluctant until I invoked Wolfe's name and said murder twice. 10 minutes later, Saul and I were outside the narrow brownstone 2 blocks east of the office. We knocked. No answer. Saul produced a tool, and 20 seconds later, we were in. The apartment was barely furnished. A mattress, a duffel bag, a fridge humming with 3 energy drinks, and some cheese sticks. And in the corner, Jeff Garrison half asleep, or trying to look like it. He opened his eyes and froze. Don't, Saul said, stepping between him and the door. I stepped closer. Regina's dead, Jeff, and we have you on video the night before she died, saying she was making a mistake. He didn't deny it, but his lips parted like he was about to. I didn't touch her, he said. I swear. I was there. I was scared. But I left. Who did it then? His eyes flicked toward the window. I don't know. I thought maybe she'd change her mind. But then she didn't show up the next morning. I figured. You figured. It was time to get out. He nodded. I looked at Saul. Bring him. We returned to the brownstone by 6. Wolfe didn't rise when we entered. Garrison sat like a man already sentenced. I didn't kill her, he said. No, Wolfe replied. But you made it possible. And you knew who did. Garrison stared at him. Miss Bell, Wolfe said. Sent the memo. You received it. I didn't. She saw the ledgers. She panicked. You were the closest proxy. She pushed. You ran. Garrison closed his eyes. She told me not to let it go public, he said. She said she'd handle it. That Regina was bluffing. She wasn't, Wolfe said. And now you are her echo. The silence that followed was thick enough to drink. Wolfe said, tomorrow night. We summon them all. The denouement. He reached for his coffee. This time, he drank it. At precisely 8 o'clock the next evening, the office was arranged for confrontation. Wolfe's desk bore only a fresh yellow notepad and a small stack of manila folders. Perfectly aligned, the globe in the corner caught the light like a glassy witness. Fritz had finished clearing the remnants of a modest veil blanket from the dining room by 7:30, and Wolfe had informed him there would be no dessert service until after the guests had departed. And not a second sooner, I'd made the calls. That morning, in my most politely threatening voice, Anya Bell, Darius Galt, and Samuel Rudd were all invited back to the brownstone. And I didn't offer time slots for negotiation. Garrison had spent the day in the back guest room under the watchful eye of Saul Panzer, who occupied the hallway like a one-man security detail with a paperback and a .38. They arrived one at a time again, but this time with less confidence. Galt looked grayer. Bell's heels clicked less sharply. Rudd looked like he'd forgotten how to hold his spine. The office was warmer than usual, and I wondered if Fritz had turned the heat up slightly. Wolfe's subtle way of recreating the greenhouse effect, unsettling by degrees. Once seated Bell on the red chair, Galt to her right, Rudd opposite them. Wolfe didn't waste a breath. He began the way he always did when justice had already been boxed and labeled, and he was merely preparing the receipt. You are all here because Miss Regina Caro is not. No one responded. She was diligent, principled, an investigator in all but title. Her instincts led her to discover the misuse of your firm's distribution channels, to conceal the illegal import and resale of controlled substances, biological, chemical, and, in some cases, endangered agricultural materials. Galt shifted, but didn't speak. Bell remained stone still. She traced the manipulation to multiple points: forged invoices, falsified manifests, redirected shipments. She compiled the evidence by hand and kept backups, both physical and digital. Wolfe lifted a folder, opened it. In the final week of her life, she confronted Jeff Garrison with the evidence. 3 times, she recorded their conversations. Galt's brow creased. Recordings, yes. Wolfe didn't even glance at him. She also informed. Mr. Garrison that she intended to deliver her findings to the authorities. That was the night before she died. He let that sink in. She died in what police called an accidental gas leak. But the details suggest deliberate tampering, controlled release, an external trigger, not careless cooking. Murder by implication, cloaked in accident. I watched the room carefully. Rudd swallowed. Galt's jaw clenched. But Bell, she blinked once, slowly, and that was all. Wolfe turned his gaze to her. Miss Bell, you were in a unique position to benefit from Regina's silence. The forged documentation was traced back to your employee credentials, a memo euphemistic. In tone, direct inconsequence was issued from your login to Mr. Garrison. It encouraged the removal of logistical obstacles, and you instructed Garrison to handle Miss Caro. Bell exhaled quietly. I told him to calm her down. That's all? No. You told him not to let the information go public. I didn't mean. You meant exactly that, Wolfe said coldly, and he, like you, understood what was implied. You believed he would intimidate her, or persuade her. He interpreted it another way. Galt turned to her. You knew she had proof. Bell didn't answer. Her lips had tightened to a straight, bloodless line. You underestimated her, Wolfe continued. You assumed she'd cave. But Regina was not a coward. She documented everything. She anticipated betrayal. She placed the proof where someone trustworthy might retrieve it, and she left clues in plain sight. He tapped the coffee grounds memo. She trusted Mr. Rudd. Rudd jolted slightly, like Wolfe had pinched him. You didn't kill her, Wolfe said, but your inaction made it possible. She asked for your help. You declined. Rudd's voice broke. I didn't know it would go that far. I thought maybe she'd scare them off. She did, Wolfe said, and they reacted. He turned next to Galt. You were aware of the misdeeds in your company, Mr. Galt. You were aware that Miss Bell's operations bore discrepancies, but you did not act because the money was convenient. The denial more so. Galt tried. I didn't authorize, no, but you tolerated, and tolerance, in such cases, is complicity. Wolfe paused. His voice dropped into that deliberate, resonant cadence he used when concluding. Miss Caro's murder was not spontaneous. It was systemic. It emerged from a culture of silence, enabled by fear, sanctioned by profit. The exact hand that rigged her apartment's gas release remains unconfirmed. But the moral responsibility lies here with all of you. I could feel it in the air, the crackle of it, the guilt, the cold truth, the way none of them could meet each other's eyes. Then Wolfe snapped his fingers. I opened the office door. Jeff Garrison stepped in. He looked even thinner than he had in the guest room. Eyes shadowed, suit wrinkled. He didn't speak. Wolfe addressed him. You have a decision, Mr. Garrison. Either you confess and accept what justice remains, or you remain silent, and we let the recordings speak for you. Garrison looked at Bell, just for a second, then at Rudd, and finally, he said, I didn't set the gas. I didn't kill her. I followed her home. I was supposed to scare her. I waited outside. I saw someone go in, but I was too far. I couldn't tell who. I heard the hiss. I panicked. I ran. Who was it? I asked. He looked down. I think it was Galt. Galt stood. That's a lie. But Wolfe cut him off. Sit down. And Galt, remarkably, did. Wolfe turned to me. You will deliver the files and recordings to Inspector Kramer. Gladly. And the ledgers, those too. I nodded. The suspects 3 now, not 4, sat in silence. Wolfe exhaled deeply and closed the top folder. That will be all. Galt stood, shaken. Rudd slunk out behind him. Belle lingered at the door. You're very sure of yourself, she said to Wolfe. He didn't look at her. No, merely correct. She left when the door shut. Wolfe looked at me. Fritz may serve the tart now, he said. Apple or custard? Apple. And justice? He nodded once. Best served. Warm. I didn't argue. Fritz's apple tart had a golden lattice top that could have been framed and hung in the Met. But Wolfe paid it less attention than usual. He cut a small square, savored one bite, then pushed the plate a 1/4 inch away, a gesture that, in his language, meant sufficiently distracted for Wolfe. That was close to a standing ovation. I leaned back in my chair, fork in hand. Well, we've got recordings, ledgers, a confession, and enough motive to open a psychology textbook. All that's missing is a headline. Wolfe grunted. Inspector Kramer will see to that. The district attorney will have his pick of charges. You think Galt actually did it? I asked. Garrison says he saw someone, but he didn't sound completely sure. Mr. Garrison's recollection is impaired by guilt, Wolfe said, sipping beer, and fear, but he is not entirely mistaken. I raised an eyebrow. So you don't think it was Galt? Wolfe looked toward the window, where the night pressed thick against the glass. Regina Caro was methodical. She revealed too much, too soon. Someone feared exposure, but it was not Galt who lacked the composure for subtlety, nor the creativity. I stared at him for a second, fork halfway to my mouth. You're saying it was Anya Bell? She orchestrated the fraud, issued the veiled memo, attempted to suppress Regina's findings, and when intimidation failed, she acted. I blinked. But Garrison was manipulated, Wolfe said. Miss Bell encouraged him to intervene, but she knew his limits. She understood that fear would stall him, so she followed her own instructions to their logical conclusion. And the gas? She had access, knowledge, precision. She knew Regina's schedule, the layout of her apartment, even how often she cooked. She needed only one evening when Regina would be alone and unsuspecting. The gas was her silent weapon, clean, ambiguous, deniable. I whistled low, and Galt is complicit, but not the killer. Miss Bell is more capable than she appears. I pushed my plate away and stood. You want me to call Kramer now? Yes, and deliver the files. All of them. Take. Saul. I nodded and went to the phone. An hour later, Kramer sat across from Wolfe, scowling. Not his usual brand of scowl. This one was deeper, weighted, like he'd found a cockroach in his sandwich after the first bite. You're telling me it wasn't Galt? He growled. The memo, the money trail, Garrison's statement, they all point to him. They point to authorization. Wolfe said, not execution. Miss Bell's memo was the catalyst. Garrison was the distraction. But the crime required someone who could act decisively, without panic. She had motive, I added, the strongest one. Regina was about to expose her, and if she did, Bell's career and probably her freedom were done. Kramer grunted, scratched his temple. I'll have them both brought in, he said. You're sure she won't crack under pressure? Wolfe gave him a withering look. She has already cracked. She merely hasn't noticed. Kramer didn't smile, but he looked almost pleased. Damn paperwork's gonna bury me. But this might make next month's hell worthwhile. He stood, snapped his notebook shut, and gave Wolfe a grudging nod. You know, he said, if you ever decided to work for the department. No, Wolfe said immediately. Kramer grunted again and left. I watched the door close behind him and turned back to Wolfe. That's it then. Wrapped, delivered, and handed to the city in a bow. Justice, Wolfe said, is rarely so neatly packaged. I frowned. You don't think she'll be convicted? I believe she will, he said. But her kind often attempts a final maneuver. Expect a public statement. Tears, fabricated evidence, perhaps even an accusation. You want me to prep for that? No, he said. I want you to rest. You've earned it. I saluted. Then I'm grabbing a drink at Rusterman's. Be back before midnight. Afraid I'll turn into a pumpkin? No, but I prefer my conscience to remain present if Kramer calls again. I left him to his orchids, which had begun to bloom again, as though the house itself had exhaled. The brownstone was quiet, stable, orderly, once more the kind of peace Wolfe considered sacred. The next morning's paper confirmed everything. Woman executive arrested in coffee fraud murder, Anya Bell. Accused of orchestrating death of whistleblower. Regina Caro article cited the recordings, the files, and Wolfe's cooperative involvement. His name, as usual, came last just the way he liked it. Rudd stopped by late that afternoon. He didn't want to talk, just handed me a sealed envelope addressed to Wolfe and asked me to thank him. I passed it along unopened. Inside was a check note, a small one and a note, handwritten in shaky cursive. I should have helped her. I didn't. Thank you for doing what I couldn't. Samuel Rudd. Wolfe read it in silence, then placed the note in the drawer and the check under a paperweight. I cleared my throat. You're gonna cash that eventually, he said, but not yet. That evening, dinner was quail stuffed with wild rice and figs, with a Madeira reduction so rich it nearly made me forget about murder, and malice and misplaced coffee grounds. Wolfe even asked for seconds afterward. I lingered in the office with a final cup of Yes Sumatra Mandhelling. Wolfe noticed. You still disapprove of the blend, he said. I disapprove of murder, I said. The coffee's fine. He grunted. The phone rang once that night. Kramer again, confirming Bell's statement. She'd blamed Garrison, claimed fear, insisted ignorance. But the evidence stood. When I relayed that, Wolfe merely nodded. She will plead, he said, but her freedom is lost. Her ambition betrayed her. He closed his eyes. And Regina Caro, she had integrity, Wolfe said softly, a rare thing, even rarer when it survives ambition. We sat in silence outside the city side, in its endless humdot, and inside the brownstone. The world had returned to order. The brownstone doesn't breathe easier. After a case is closed, it just exhales differently. There's no celebration, no fanfare, just the natural return to silence, structure, and routines so fixed they could be measured by metronome. The orchids resume blooming on schedule. Fritz sharpens his knives like they're members of a string quartet. Wolfe reads. I file. That particular morning, as sunlight cut across the parquet floor with the precision of a diamond merchant, I was sitting at my desk sorting through clippings for the case file. The Caro matter had made the papers in waves. The tabloids called it the Spy Syndicate murder, which Wolfe hated on principle. The Times called it the quiet death of a coffee queen, which he merely snorted at. But even he couldn't deny the ripple effect it caused. Indictments, arrests, and to new Senate subcommittees trying to look relevant. He hadn't spoken much about it since Kramer's last call, but I knew the wheels in his head hadn't stopped. He didn't forget things, he archived them, and when something didn't quite fit, he'd let it ferment until the stink demanded his attention. As it turned out, that moment came at 11:22 a.m. Archie, he said suddenly, not looking up from the botanical journal he pretended to be reading. Yes, sir. What do you make of Mr. Rudd? Guilt-ridden, honest, nervous, possibly allergic to confrontation. Did he lie to us? No, I said. Not that I can tell. And yet, Wolfe murmured, he benefited. That gave me. Pause. You mean professionally? Regina Caro's death left a gap. Galt's resignation left another. Bell's arrest cleared the rest of the board. Mr. Rudd now heads Damber and Galt's operations in New York. I blinked. He what? Wolfe finally looked at me. It was in yesterday's business section. You didn't read it? I was focused on the murder section. He grunted. I stood and crossed to the clippings file. Sure enough, buried in a 3-paragraph business blurb on page C12 of the Wall Street Ledger was the announcement. Samuel Rudd appointed interim managing director of Damber and Galt. No quotes. No photo, just the facts. You think he maneuvered for it? I asked. No, Wolfe said, but he was prepared to accept what the vacuum offered. I returned to my seat. If you're thinking of reopening anything, we're going to need more coffee. I am not, he replied. The murder was committed by Miss Bell. The trail confirms it. But I am concerned by the nature of Mr. Rudd's silence. He knew more than he admitted. He didn't mislead us, but he withheld. I frowned. You think he saw Bell go into Regina's apartment that night? I think, Wolfe said. He suspected she might, and chose not to interfere. It hung there for a moment. Not enough to accuse, not enough to forget. What do we do with that? I asked. Nothing, for now. Fritz appeared at the doorway. Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Rudd is here. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. Unexpected. Should I turn him away? Fritz asked. No, send him in. I moved to open the office door. Rudd stepped in a moment later, hat in hand, tie straight, posture better than the last time. He looked like a man trying very hard to seem stable. But I'd seen too many men try that look not to recognize the cracks beneath it. Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Rudd. He sat when invited, but didn't lean back. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small leather notebook. I found this among Regina's personal effects. He said it was mailed to the office anonymously, no return address. It's hers. I recognized the handwriting. I took it and handed it to Wolfe. He opened it, slowly, carefully, like it might combust. The pages were filled with note dates, initials, sketches of floor plans, and names, not business-related, personal, observations of colleagues, personality traits, suspicions, and one page labeled in careful script, "If I die," Wolfe read aloud. "If this ends with silence, know that I didn't walk into it. I was pushed, not by strangers, but by familiar hands. They won't come at me with fury. They'll use suggestion, manipulation, fear, and the worst betrayal will not be the crime, but the people who knew and did nothing." He closed the notebook and placed it on his desk with uncommon delicacy. Rudd didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, "I think she meant me." "Yes," Wolfe said quietly. "I believe she did." Rudd nodded slowly. "She asked me to speak up. I told her not to rush, that she should be cautious, that she needed allies, and you did nothing." Wolfe said, not cruelly, just plainly. Rudd looked down. "No, I didn't. But I will now." "What do you mean?" "I've contacted the board. I'm dissolving all internal distribution contracts. Everyone Regina flagged in her ledgers is being suspended. I've hired an external auditor, and I've volunteered full cooperation with federal investigators." Wolfe gave a slight nod. "You'll be ruined," I said. "Possibly," Rudd admitted. "But not like her. Regina wasn't ruined. She was erased. I can't let that happen." Quietly, we sat in silence for a moment. Then Wolfe said, "You're not innocent, Mr. Rudd, but you may yet be useful." Rudd stood. "That's all I can hope for." He left, and I closed the door behind him. Wolfe didn't say anything for a full minute. Then he opened the notebook again, found the last page, and read something silently to himself. Finally, he looked up at me. "Archie, I would like a glass of beer and a fresh cup of Ethiopian hurrah for you." I raised an eyebrow. "You sure we're not toasting anything?" "No," he said. "But we are honoring something, resolve, and remorse." I went to the kitchen. Fritz had already anticipated the request. When I came back, Wolfe had set the little notebook beside his chair, not on the pile for filing, but next to the first edition of Phytologia. A place of respect. As I handed him the glass, I said, "You think she knew this would happen?" "She hoped someone would ensure it did," Wolfe said. "And did we?" He sipped, then nodded. Double quotes, "Yes. In the end, and for Nero Wolfe, that was as close to justice as the world often got." The brownstone was unusually still that night, not quiet, in the way Wolfe liked, a comfortable silence filled with the low simmer of Fritz's sauces and the shuffling of orchid leaves upstairs, but still in that tense, hovering way after something large has passed through, leaving the air rearranged, like an echo waiting to finish. I sat in the office, finishing the final notes on the case. The files were in order, printouts of the ledgers, a flash drive copy of the recordings, a summary of Garrison's confession, and Rudd's visit and Regina's final notebook. All of it stacked neatly in the drawer marked closed. Though we both knew some drawers never truly shut, Wolfe was reading, or pretending to. He held the orchid grower's companion open, but I'd watched him stare at the same page for over 20 minutes. His eyes weren't scanning, they were waiting, and I had a guess what for. I closed the drawer, stood, and said, "Want me to check the mail?" Wolfe didn't glance up. "There won't be any. Sure about that?" "Yes, Miss Bell has already written." I paused. "How do you know?" "She is too proud not to, and too shrewd to say it aloud." I nodded and walked to the front door anyway, half out of habit, half because some things have to be confirmed in person. Sure enough, nestled beneath the edge of the doormat like a leaf hoping not to be stepped on, was a white envelope. No return address. I brought it back inside and handed it to Wolfe. He didn't touch it right away, just looked at it. "Smell," he said. I gave it a sniff. Expensive perfume. Not Regina's. Something French. Sharp. Like politics in a bottle. Exactly. He opened the envelope with his silver letter opener and removed a single sheet of cream-colored stationery. The handwriting was flawless, practiced, feminine. It didn't bother wasting time with greetings. You played the game to the end. I underestimated you. Perhaps that was my final mistake. You were right, of course, about motive, method, and malice. But I will not offer confession. I will offer something else. Mr. Rudd is not clean. He saw me go into Regina's apartment. He said nothing. He let it happen. Use that knowledge how you see fit. As for me, let them try to convict. I'll give them a story worth printing. A.B. Wolfe read it once, and then again, then handed it to me. I read it and frowned. So she wants a trial. She wants a stage. You think she'll get it? Wolfe sipped his beer. Not as she imagines. But yes, the press loves a woman who poisons quietly and wears tailored suits. I dropped the letter into the case file. You believe her about Rudd, I believe. He saw something, whether it was Bell or only the shape of guilt, I cannot say. But I also believe he is now trying to rectify his cowardice. That is not innocence, but it is effort. You going to tell the police about this letter? I already have, he said. I raised my eyebrows. You called them? No. I mailed a copy this afternoon. I chuckled. You really don't like being beaten to anything. Wolfe looked satisfied. I like facts to arrive precisely when they are needed. There was a long pause after that. I moved to the window and looked out into the street. The lamplight caught puddles on the pavement, turning them into patches of moving glass. A couple passed by, arm in arm, laughing softly. The world went on. Behind me, Wolfe said. This case was not about murder. It was about fear. I turned. Fear. Regina feared being silenced. Bell feared exposure. Rudd feared conflict. Galt feared disruption. Even Garrison, he feared responsibility. And us, we feared the loss of order. He folded his hands. Injustice is not always loud. Sometimes it creeps in through the back door and takes up residence in the pantry. It spoils. Slowly, without vigilance, it becomes invisible. I nodded slowly. So we do what we do. Yes, Wolfe said. So we do. Fritz entered just then with a tray camembert, fresh bread, a small bowl of olives, and 2 glasses, midnight snack, he said, to mark the end. Wolfe inclined his head. Perfect. We ate in silence for a while. Wolfe didn't ask for more beer. I didn't mention the half-empty file drawer or the unopened mail that might hold other futures. After a time, he said, I will not take another case this week. Shock. Perhaps next week. We'll pencil it in. He paused. The orchids are in bloom again. I noticed. They did not bloom the night Regina Caro died. I looked at him. No, I said, they didn't. He reached over, took the notebook Regina had written, and placed it in the small wooden box on the shelf behind him, the one labeled exceptions. Wolfe doesn't do sentiment, but he does memory, and that was as close as it came. I stood, stretched, and said, well, boss, justice served, dinner eaten, and order restored. I'd say that's a good night. Wolfe leaned back, closed his eyes, and murmured, until the next disruption. I turned out the light and left him in the glow of the lamp and the quiet rustle of orchid leaves. The brown stone was still again, but this time the stillness felt earned. The week that followed moved slower than cold syrup. But for once, no one complained. The papers had their headlines, the DA had his indictments, and Wolfe had returned to a meticulous orchid feeding schedule that involved pipettes, muttered Latin, and an uncharacteristic hum while misting the Paphiopedilums. That's when I knew the case was really over. Wolfe only hums when the world, in his mind, has clicked back into alignment. The Caro investigation hadn't just resolved a murder, it had overturned a layered scam. 3 careers, and at least 2 carefully curated reputations. Galt had resigned under pressure, citing health concerns, which probably referred to the slow boil in his conscience, or maybe just his lawyer's ulcer. Bell remained in custody, awaiting trial, and had already sold exclusive interview rights to a media outlet that printed more scandal than sentences. Garrison had pled out to accessory, offered full cooperation, and vanished into pretrial obscurity. And Samuel Rudd, well, he was trying. If there's a more Wolfe-endorsed form of penance than competent administration, I haven't found it. I had just finished indexing the last exhibit from the case Regina's ledger scans when the doorbell rang. I checked the clock. Noon sharp. Archie. Wolfe called from the office. If that is Inspector Kramer, I will speak with him. If it is a reporter, I will not. It was neither Dot, it was a woman in her early 30s, sharp-featured, red coat, nervous fingers. She introduced herself as Mary and Caro Regina's younger sister. I wasn't sure I should come, she said quietly, stepping into the foyer. But Mr. Rudd said your office was responsible for the clarity. I led her into the office. Wolfe, to his credit, stood. Only briefly, but I marked it. Miss Caro, he said, please accept my condolences. She sat, nodded once, then placed a slim envelope on the desk. She left this for me. I only found it yesterday. It wasn't in her will. It was taped behind her kitchen clock. She must have left it the day she died. Wolfe opened the envelope slowly, extracted a single folded page, and read it in silence. Then he passed it to me. "Marianne, if I don't come home, don't let them bury me in headlines. I wasn't a victim. I was a witness. I saw what was happening, and I chose to act. Not because I thought I'd win, but because I couldn't live with silence. I hope someone else can live with the truth. Regina." There wasn't much to say after that. Miss Caro rose, shook Wolfe's hand. He allowed it and thanked him again. After she left, Wolfe returned to his chair and sat heavily. "That," he said, "was a woman of moral rigor." I nodded. "And moral rigor, these days, tends to come with a price." "Yes," Wolfe murmured, "but sometimes it pays interest." Later that evening, with the air crisp and quiet, Wolfe summoned me to the office again. He had placed the final file, Regina's case, into the central cabinet. That drawer, like few others, clicked shut with finality. "Archie," he said, "we were not merely solving a murder." "I figured that," I said. "We were correcting a ledger." He went on. "Not of invoices, of conscience." He looked at me, eyes steady. "Would you have done what she did?" It wasn't a challenge. It was a curiosity. "I'd like to think I would," I said. "But I've never been fond of being a martyr. I'd probably blackmail them into changing their ways, and then get out with a clean conscience. And a bonus." He almost smiled. "Pragmatism," he said, "is not a crime. But cowardice can be." I replied. He didn't argue. Dinner that night was poached trout with lemon cream and herbs from the greenhouse. Wolfe ate silently, but he had 3 servings. I took that as gratitude. After the plates were cleared and the last sip of beer consumed, I leaned back and said, "We get many cases where justice actually feels like justice." Wolfe tapped his fingers once on the table. "Few," he said, "but those are enough." Then he stood, moved to the hallway, and disappeared into the orchards. I poured myself a final cup of hurrah, walked into the office, and looked around. The chair, the globe, the files, the silence, all back in their rightful place. The brownstone was, as always, restored. And outside, in a world less orderly but still turning, the truth finally was on record.